I've always been the kind of person who shows up. That's just how I was raised. You show up for people. You answer the call at 2 in the morning. You drive 3 hours in the rain if someone needs you. You don't make excuses, and you don't make people beg. So when the doctor told me I needed emergency gallbladder surgery, the first thing I felt wasn't fear, it was certainty. My family would be there. Of course they would. I was wrong. My name is not important. What matters is the story, and I promise you, every word of it is true. I'm 31 years old. I work in HR for a mid-sized logistics company in Columbus, Ohio. I rent a small house, I drive a used Civic, and I send money home every month without being asked because that's just what I do. I've been doing it since I was 23. My parents, my older sister, my younger brother, I show up for all of them every single time. Birthday dinners, hospital visits, moving boxes up 3 flights of stairs in July. That's me. That's always been me. My grandmother on my mother's side, I call her Gram, has been watching all of this for years. She's 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and she doesn't miss much. She lives about 40 minutes from me in a little house she's owned since 1979. We talk on the phone every Sunday, sometimes twice. She's the kind of woman who remembers exactly what you said 3 conversations ago, and brings it back up when it matters most. She raised 5 kids mostly on her own after my grandfather passed, and she did it without complaining, without drama, without asking for anything she didn't earn. I've always looked up to her, more than I've ever told her. My parents have been married for 33 years. Every year in August, they do something to celebrate their anniversary. Usually it's dinner downtown, maybe a weekend away somewhere close. This year was different. This year was their 33rd, and my sister had been planning something big since January, a full week in Maui, 7 nights at a resort she found on some travel blog. Flights, Lou experience, snorkeling excursion, the whole package. She put a group deposit down in February. My brother and his girlfriend were going. My parents were obviously going. They'd been talking about it since winter, showing me photos of the resort at family dinners, asking me if I'd checked the weather in Hawaii in August. I smiled and nodded. I had already decided I wasn't going to be able to make it. The time off didn't line up, and honestly the flights were expensive, but I was genuinely happy for them. They deserved a real vacation. My dad had been working doubles at the plant for most of the spring, and my mom looked tired in a way that broke my heart a little. They needed this. What nobody planned for was what happened to me in June. It started as a stomachache. That's all it was. At least that's what I told myself for almost 2 weeks. A stomachache that came and went, usually after I ate. I figured I'd been stress eating too much junk, or maybe I'd picked up some kind of stomach bug that just wasn't clearing. I took antacids, I drank ginger tea, I Googled my symptoms at midnight, and talked myself out of the worst possibilities. Then one Tuesday night, I woke up at 2 in the morning with pain so severe I couldn't stand up straight. I'm not exaggerating when I say I have never felt anything like it in my life. It radiated from my right side up into my shoulder. I was sweating through my sheets. I called my mom first. She didn't answer. I called my sister. Straight to voicemail. I ended up driving myself to the emergency room at 2:30 in the morning, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, taking the back roads because I was afraid I'd pass out on the highway. The ER doctor told me my gallbladder was badly inflamed and I had multiple gallstones. He said I needed surgery, and I needed it soon. Not in 6 months, not after the holidays, but within the next few weeks before the situation became truly dangerous. He referred me to a surgeon who had an opening on August 9th. That was the earliest available slot. I took it. August 9th was 4 days into my family's Maui trip. I told my mom the next morning. She was quiet for a second on the phone and then she said, "Oh no, honey. Are you sure it can't wait until we get back?" I told her the doctor said it shouldn't wait. She got quiet again. Then she said she'd call me back. She called back 2 hours later. She said she'd talked to my dad and my sister. They'd looked at everything, the flights, the resort cancellation policy, the excursion deposits, and they just didn't see how they could cancel at this point. They were so sorry. They'd lose thousands of dollars. The whole trip had been planned for so long. I would be okay, right? It was a routine surgery. People had gallbladder surgery all the time, and they'd be back on August 15th. They'd come straight to me from the airport. I sat with the phone against my cheek for a long time after she said that. I didn't know what to say. I kept thinking, surely I misheard her. Surely she's going to say something else. But she didn't. I said, okay, because what else do you say? I called Graham that night. I wasn't even going to tell her. I didn't want to worry her. But she knew something was wrong the second she heard my voice. And she asked me point blank what had happened. So I told her everything. She was quiet the whole time I talked, which is unusual for her. When I finished, she said, "I'll be there Thursday." I told her she didn't have to do that. She said, "I didn't ask your opinion." She showed up Thursday morning with a casserole dish, a bag of crossword puzzle books, and a rolling suitcase. She parked in my driveway and walked in like she'd been planning this for months. I cried a little when I saw her, which embarrassed me, but she just hugged me and told me to go put on something comfortable, because we had nothing to do but rest until Friday. I checked into the hospital on August 9th at 6 in the morning. Graham sat in the waiting room for the entire 3 hours of prep and surgery. When I came out of anesthesia, the first face I saw was hers. She was sitting in the chair next to my bed with her reading glasses on and a crossword puzzle in her lap, calm as anything, like she had all the time in the world. "Good," she said. "You're back. You scared me a little in there." I laughed, which hurt, and she handed me a cup of ice chips. My mom texted at 9:30 that morning. She sent a string of hearts and said they were thinking of me and she hoped everything went okay. My sister texted a few hours later and said she was so relieved it was over. My brother sent a thumbs up emoji. I stared at that thumbs up emoji for probably 3 full minutes. Not a phone call, not a voice message, a thumbs up. The surgeon discharged me the next afternoon with a list of instructions, a prescription for pain medication, and activity restrictions for the next 4 to 6 weeks. No lifting, limited walking, no driving for at least 10 days. Graham drove me home, picked up my prescription, made dinner, and slept in my guest room like it was the most natural thing in the world. The recovery was harder than I expected. I want to be honest about that because I think people minimize it. Laparoscopic surgery is still surgery. Your body has been through something real. The first 3 days, I could barely get from the bedroom to the bathroom without having to sit down halfway. The pain medication made me foggy and nauseous. I had no appetite. I couldn't sleep well because every time I shifted in bed, I felt it. And I was alone, except for Graham. She drove me to my follow-up appointment 5 days after surgery. She went into the exam room with me, listened to everything the doctor said, and asked questions I wouldn't have thought to ask. About restrictions on certain foods, about what warning signs to watch for, about how long before I could return to normal activity. She wrote things down in a small notebook she pulled from her purse. When we got back to the car, she said, "Okay, I know what to make you for dinner now." I cried on the way home. Not sad crying exactly, more like release, like something I'd been holding too tightly finally let go. She didn't say anything. She just kept one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on mine. My family got back from Maui on August 15th. Their flight landed at 7 in the evening. My mom texted me from the airport to say they'd landed safely and the trip had been incredible. She sent a photo of the sunset from the resort on the last night. It was genuinely beautiful. I looked at it for a long time, and I wasn't even fully sure what I felt. They didn't come straight to me from the airport. My dad was tired from the long flight. My sister had an early work meeting the next morning. My brother dropped his girlfriend home first, and then just went to his apartment. My mom said she'd come by on the weekend when everyone was more rested. She came by Saturday afternoon. She brought me a small box of macadamia nut chocolates from Maui, and a refrigerator magnet shaped like a pineapple. She sat on my couch for about 45 minutes, showed me pictures on her phone, told me about the food and the snorkeling and how gorgeous the weather had been. She asked me a few times how I was feeling. I said fine. She said good. She gave me a hug when she left. Graham watched all of this from the armchair in the corner. She didn't say much. My sister came by 2 days after that. She'd been back almost a week by then. She brought me flowers, a nice bouquet from the grocery store, the kind you get by the checkout. And she sat with me for maybe 30 minutes before she said she had to get going. She had a lot of catch up at work. She asked if I needed anything. I said I was okay. She said she was really glad I was feeling better. That was it. What bothered me more than anything wasn't that they went. I know that sounds strange, but I mean it. I'd had weeks to sit with that. What bothered me, what really sat wrong in my chest, was the way they came home. The way they talked about the trip for days. The way nobody seemed to notice, or care, what the week had actually been like on my end. Nobody asked about the surgery itself. Nobody asked what recovery was really like. Nobody asked Graham what it had been like to take care of me alone for a week, or thanked her for it. My brother never came by at all. Not once. My mom called me about 10 days after she got back, and in the middle of the conversation, she brought up money. She said my dad had done the math on the trip, and they'd spent more than they budgeted. She mentioned that I hadn't contributed to the group gift they'd all put together for the resort. Some kind of anniversary dinner upgrade. She didn't outright say I owed them money. But she let the sentence just kind of hang there. I was still taking prescription medication. I had 2 more weeks of restricted activity ahead of me, and my mom was on the phone hinting that I owed money toward a vacation I hadn't attended. Graham was sitting at my kitchen table when that call happened. I didn't tell her what it was about, but she could hear my end of it. When I hung up, she was very still. She asked me what that was about. I told her. She nodded slowly. She didn't say anything else, but she got up, went to her room, and I heard her open the small leather notebook she kept in her bag. Looking back, I now know what she was doing, but I didn't know it then. Graham stayed with me for almost 3 weeks in total. She finally went home the last week of August, only after my doctor cleared me to drive, and I convinced her I was genuinely okay on my own. We hugged in the driveway for a long time. She told me she loved me and she was proud of me. I told her I didn't know what I would have done without her. She said, "You would have managed, but you shouldn't have had to." I thought about that sentence a lot in the weeks that followed. September came. Life went more or less back to normal. I went back to work. My family and I talked the way we always had. Sunday dinners once or twice a month, group texts about nothing, the usual rhythms. Nobody brought up August. It was like it had just been folded away somewhere and tucked out of sight. My parents' official anniversary celebration, the big party, was scheduled for the second weekend of October. My sister had organized it months ago. A rented venue in our parents' neighborhood, a catered dinner, about 60 guests including extended family, neighbors, old friends. It was going to be a real event. My sister had made a slideshow. There were centerpieces. I had bought my dress back in July, before any of this happened. I helped where I could in the weeks leading up to it. I handled the RSVPs because my sister was slammed at work. I made 2 phone calls to the caterer to confirm dietary restrictions. I picked up the printed programs from the copy shop because nobody else had time. I did it all the same way I always do things. Quietly, completely, without making it into something. Graham was invited, of course. She drove herself in from her house and arrived early. She was wearing a navy blue dress and her good earrings. She looked beautiful. I hugged her at the door and she held on a little longer than usual. I noticed she had her leather notebook tucked in her purse. I didn't think much of it at the time. The party was lovely for what it was. The venue looked nice. The food was good. My parents danced to their wedding song and my mom cried a little. My sister gave a long toast that was genuinely moving. She has a real gift for words when she wants to. People laughed, people mingled. My dad got a little choked up when he tried to speak. For a few hours, I let myself just be in it. Just be there, celebrating something real. Then my dad called Graham up to the front. He said something gracious about how she'd been part of the family for 33 years, how grateful they were, how much she meant to everyone. He handed her the microphone as a kind of gesture. A few words, maybe a toast. The room was warm and relaxed. People had wine in their hands. The mood was good. Graham took the microphone. She smiled. She thanked everyone for being there. She said how proud she was of her daughter's long marriage, how love built on consistency and loyalty was a rare and beautiful thing. And then she said, "I want to share something with everyone tonight, because I think the people in this room should know what real consistency looks like." The mood shifted just slightly. I noticed a few people exchange glances. She opened her notebook. She said that while the family was in Maui this past August, her granddaughter, me, had been in the hospital having emergency surgery, alone. That she'd driven 40 minutes to stay with her because no one else could be there. That she'd sat in that waiting room for 3 hours. That she'd gone to the follow-up appointments and taken notes and made meals and done the things that families do. She said she had written everything down, dates, times, text messages that were sent versus phone calls that were not. She read a few of them aloud. Not the full text, just enough. The thumbs up emoji. The text from the airport about how incredible the trip had been. The phone call about the money. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She spoke in the same calm, measured tone she uses to tell me what she's cooking for Sunday dinner. But the room had gone completely quiet. She said, "I am not telling you this to cause pain. I am telling you this because truth, when it is documented and spoken aloud in front of witnesses, has a way of making itself permanent. And my granddaughter deserves for people who love her to know the truth." She set the notebook down on the table in front of her. She looked at my parents. She said, "She would never say this herself. She never does. That's always been the problem." My mom looked like she'd been turned to stone. My dad's face had gone a strange, unreadable color. My sister had stopped breathing, I think. My brother was staring at his plate. There were 60 people in that room. Neighbors, extended family, friends of 30 years, people who had known me since I was in elementary school. My aunt, my mom's sister, was the first person to say something. She said quietly, "I didn't know any of that." And the way she said it, not accusing but just genuinely stunned, somehow made it worse or better. I'm still not sure which. I won't tell you the dinner recovered smoothly after that. It didn't. There was an hour of awkward regrouping, people stepping outside, quiet conversations in corners, my mom disappearing to the bathroom for a very long time. My sister pulled me aside and said she didn't know what to say. I told her she didn't have to say anything right now. My dad found me near the dessert table and hugged me without saying a word. And I felt him exhale against my shoulder like something in him had been released too. My brother came to find me before the end of the night. He looked like he'd been thinking hard for a long time. He said, "I should have come to see you. I don't have an excuse. I didn't, and I should have." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real, and I could tell it cost him something to say it. That felt like more than I'd gotten in months. In the weeks after the party, things changed. Not overnight, not all at once, and not without some lingering awkwardness that I think will take a long time to fully settle. My mom called me the Monday after and cried, which is something she almost never does. She said she hadn't realized how bad it had been. I said gently that I thought she had realized at least a little, but that it was easier not to look at it directly. She didn't argue with that. We stayed on the phone for a long time. My sister started calling more. Not just texting, actually calling. We had a conversation in late October that lasted 2 hours, and it was the most honest we'd been with each other maybe ever. She said some things I needed to hear. I said some things she needed to hear. It wasn't comfortable, but it was true. My brother took me to brunch in November, just the two of us, which had never happened before, not once in our lives. He paid, which is how I knew he was taking it seriously. And Graham? I called her the morning after the party before I even had coffee. She picked up on the second ring. I told her I couldn't believe what she'd done. She said, "How are you feeling about it?" I said I wasn't sure yet, a little shaky, a little relieved, a little like the ground had shifted under me and I was still figuring out how to stand. She said, "That's exactly right. That's what truth feels like. It moves things." I asked her how long she'd been planning it. She said since the night she overheard my phone call with my mom, the one about the money. She said something in her had gone very still and very decided in that moment, and she'd started writing things down that same evening. I asked her if she'd been nervous, standing up there in front of 60 people. She was quiet for a second, then she said no. I was 81 years old, and I have buried a husband and raised 5 children, and I've been watching you give and give and give to people who take and take and take, and I was not nervous at all. I was ready. I don't cry easily. I want you to know that about me. But I cried then. Not the desperate kind of crying, the kind that comes from pain that has nowhere else to go, the other kind. The kind that comes after something has shifted, when the weight you've been carrying so long you forgot it, was there finally lifts. Some things I know now that I didn't know fully before. You can love your family completely and still need to look clearly at how they treat you. Those two things don't cancel each other out. Love isn't a reason to keep being invisible. And the people who notice you, really notice, not just when it's convenient. Those are the people who show you what love is actually supposed to feel like. Graham showed me that. She didn't lecture me about it, didn't sit me down and explain it in step. She just showed me, in the most ordinary and extraordinary way, that someone paying attention to you can change everything. That someone deciding you are worth standing up for, even when you won't stand up for yourself, is one of the most profound things one human being can do for another. I'm not going to tell you my family is fixed. That's not how families work. But I will tell you that something real shifted that night, and the shift has held. We are more honest with each other than we have ever been. I stopped quietly absorbing things, and hoping nobody noticed. I started saying, out loud, what I needed. It felt unnatural at first. It still does sometimes. But it's getting easier. This past Thanksgiving, Graham and I cooked together at my house. Just the two of us, for most of the afternoon before the rest of the family arrived. She taught me how she makes her sweet potato pie from scratch. Her mother's recipe, which I have been asking about for years. We stood in my kitchen with flour on our hands, and the windows fogged up from the oven, and she talked, and I listened. She told me about a time her own family had let her down, decades ago, something she'd never told anyone. She told me how she had gotten through it. She told me she hoped I never had to carry things as quietly as she had. By the time everyone else showed up, the house smelled like sweet potatoes and brown sugar, and something that I can only describe as home. My mom hugged me at the door. My dad helped clear the counter without being asked. My sister brought wine, and my brother actually arrived on time. We ate together around a table that felt, for the first time in a long time, like it held everyone equally. I looked across the room at Graham, sitting in the good chair by the window with a cup of tea in her hands, watching all of us the way she always does. Quietly, carefully, missing nothing. She caught my eye. She smiled. I smiled back, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Seen, whole, and not alone.